At my husband's funeral, I was handed a note. Your husband had a mistress. She is standing next to you. I looked around in panic. There were only Robert's colleagues and friends around me, all men. And to my right was my daughter-in-law. She looked at me and smiled, but that smile sent shivers down my spine. The note indicated the time and place to meet. After the farewell ceremony, everyone went to the cemetery, and I went to a diner on the corner of 4th and 5th Avenues to meet the man who promised to tell me the whole truth. My name is Lucy, yes, that Lucy born in sandpaper, raised in Detroit, where we learned to drive in snow and speak fluent sarcasm by the 7th grade. I'm 59, with a laugh line for every decade and a spine my mother used to call rebar and pearls. When I first met Roger on a July afternoon that smelled like hot tar and wild clover, I had a tidy life, assistant principal's desk arranged in ruthless rows, a bungalow paid off before 40, and a Sunday choir solo that could hush even our rowdiest deacons. Then in walked this tall, disarming man with a grin that could sell rust to a Buick. He asked me for the best lunch counter within walking distance, and I, professional, prudent, walked him there myself. 3 months later, I packed my life into 4 boxes, left a city that had given me everything, and followed him to another state, with a ring on my finger and a certainty in my chest so steady it could keep time. People told me I was reckless. I told them I was in love. And for a long stretch of ordinary years, I never once regretted it. When girlfriends complained their husbands were cheating, I'd tap my wedding band and say, anyone can cheat, but not mine. I felt almost sorry for them, almost like a woman who steps out of a storm into a warm kitchen and watches others fumble with broken umbrellas. I wasn't smug, I was loyal, I was sure. Roger died on a Tuesday that started with sunshine and ended with a bone-deep cold. The doctor looked at me over the rims of his glasses, kind eyes, rehearsed tone, and said there'd been a heart condition. A condition, as if love were safe and only muscle was fragile. Roger had never complained about his heart. He'd complained about traffic, coffee, and my habit of hoarding cookbook clippings under the sink, but never his heart. At the viewing, I wore black because that's what widows do, and I wore lipstick because that's what Lucy does. Michael, my son, my only, stood beside his wife Gloria. She had that glossy, just stepped out of a magazine look I used to imagine having when I was 25 and foolish. I only ever got the foolish part. Mom, Michael whispered, eyes wet, you have me and Gloria. He hugged me so tight I felt his ribs. Gloria slid her arms around me too, perfumed and warm, her cheek against mine. We're here, she murmured. I believed her then. I am, if nothing else, a woman who believes until she absolutely cannot. Then the note, my first thought, a prank as cruel as a nail in a tire. My second thought, if this was a joke, someone was going to learn a very Detroit lesson about consequences. But I kept my face arranged, nodded at condolences like I was balancing a tray of glassware, and waited for the right moment to leave. Outside the chapel, the wind had sharp teeth. I tucked the note into my coat sleeve and told Michael I needed a moment. He squeezed my hands, and Gloria, sweet Gloria, brushed a tear from my cheek with the pad of her thumb like a daughter would. We'll meet you at the cemetery? She asked. Yes, I said, because lies are lighter than truth when your legs are shaking. The diner on 4th and 5th had a neon coffee cup buzzing half-lit in the window and a bell over the door that sounded like a tired triangle from 9th grade band. After the hush of the funeral home, the clatter and hiss of a working kitchen felt almost human. I slid into a booth and ordered tea because coffee felt like a betrayal of habit, and habit was the only raft I had. She arrived like a headline, Roger's secretary, Melissa elegant black dress, sunglasses she didn't remove, a posture that said she'd been doing damage control since before breakfast. She carried a small leather bag and the kind of composure that makes a woman hard to like and impossible to intimidate. Mrs. Talbot, she said softly. Lucy, I corrected. If you've come to read me my husband's sins, you can at least call me by my name. She tilted her head, appraising. Lucy then, please sit. She was already seated. That's the type always inviting you to the chair you chose first. I'm going to be direct, she said, because the slow version is just cruel. Cruelty seems to be today's theme, I said, and surprised myself by how even my voice sounded. That's the thing about shock, it puts a cold hand on the back of your neck and steadies you just long enough to get the blade in. I've known about Roger and Gloria for 6 months, Melissa said. She didn't whisper. She didn't flinch. She said my daughter-in-law's name like it was any other noun table, spoon, thunderclap. He swore he'd end it. He didn't. There were others before her. At least 5. Different ages. Some of them barely, she stopped herself. Adults, but too young for a man like Roger. The bell at the door rang as if to mark the sentence. Somewhere behind us, dishes sang against each other and a cook cursed the fryer. I heard it all from very far away. Why tell me now? I asked. You could have called me months ago, a year ago. You could have slipped a note into a coat pocket like you did today. She took off her sunglasses then, and I saw a pair of clear, pale eyes rimmed in sleepless red. Because you were going to spend the rest of your life chasing a ghost. He was a scoundrel, she said, and the word sounded antique and accurate. He cheated. He was careless with people who cared about him. Don't put yourself on an altar for a man who never learned to kneel. I don't recall lighting any candles for Roger, I said, but I do recall waking up with him for 19 years and believing he loved me. He might have, she said, in ways that didn't include fidelity. She reached into her bag and slid a phone across the Formica black work mobile with a scratched case and the faint smell of cologne. Evidence, she said, enough to end anyone's appetite. I didn't touch it. Not at first. You kept this, I said. I confiscated it on Friday when he left it at the office. He had 2 phones. This one is the extracurricular file cabinet. She exhaled. If I could go back, I'd call you months ago. I was a coward. Today I decided I didn't want to be one anymore. My hands were steady when I finally reached for the phone. Old reflex. Lock screen code. It opened. Melissa had already arranged everything. Albums named with dates, a folder of messages titled G. The first photo was a mirror selfie I didn't want to see and couldn't look away from my daughter-in-law's hand on his tie, a hotel bathroom behind them. The kind with towels folded into swans like the management read to many romance novels. The messages were worse. Him, we will definitely be together. Just wait a little. Her, a string of hearts and something about timing, about how much it hurt to sit across from me at Sunday dinner, about our plan. My mouth went dry as chalk. I scrolled. There were names I didn't recognize and hotels I did because the city has only so many places where men trying to be discreet are something of a tradition. Lunch breaks turned into trysts. Negotiations turned into relieving tension. Melissa stirred her coffee, a small spoon tapping porcelain like a metronome. I booked him a room almost every day these past months, she said quietly. Sometimes too. I wanted to stop. I told him he was trying to outrun himself. He laughed. He never ran a day in his life, I said. He sauntered. Grief arrived then, not as tears, but as heat. Offense, like a fever. The indignity of it, the cheapness. The secret soundtrack under our life. The way he'd made me feel silly for asking where he'd been on a Tuesday in March. The way I'd apologized to him after we argued about nothing. I was the kind of woman who apologizes for existing in the wrong corner of a room. Not anymore. Lucy, Melissa said. I know this is. There's more. There are bank receipts and a storage unit I found on a corporate card and… No, I said, lifting my palm. Enough for today. I closed the phone, pushed it back to her. Keep it safe. I'll need copies. You believe me, she said. Not quite a question. I believe the version of my life that was too quiet to notice the sirens. The waitress appeared with my tea and Melissa's untouched coffee. I squeezed lemon into mine and watched the cloud bloom. What do you want from me? I asked her. Nothing, she said, except for you to stop making altars out of men who never earned them. She slid a small envelope across the table. I wrote down hotels, dates, names, also legal advice. A friend who owes me a favor. I tucked the envelope into my clutch. You could have told me at the office, or in a letter. You chose the funeral. I chose the day you couldn't pretend anymore. She stood, slipping her sunglasses back on as if the truth were too bright. I'm sorry, Lucy. I am. For what he did, and for what I didn't do sooner. When she left, I sat with my tea until it went cold, then drank it anyway, because I was raised to finish what I start. Outside, the light had turned that thin gray that looks like surrender. I hailed a cab and rode back to the house without thinking. My hands were folded in my lap like they belonged to someone older and gentler than me. Michael and Gloria were waiting in the living room, the sympathy bouquets arranged like a barricade around the sofa. I could smell lilies and the faint, clean scent of the detergent Gloria uses for everything, even leather shoes. She stood when I came in and rushed to hug me, her hair brushing my cheek. We were worried, she said. You missed the burial. I needed a minute, I said. Where's Michael? I didn't look at her when I asked. I couldn't yet. Right here, Mom. My son came from the kitchen, a nervous smile stitched onto his face. "We have news," he said, and he was already glowing, already rehearsed. The way people look when they think they're about to set a fractured world back into place. Gloria took his hand. She looked at me, she looked at me with a radiance I'd admired for years, the kind of beauty that makes older women soften and men try to be witty. "We want you to feel better," she said. "Losing your father is a big blow, but we have news." I knew before she said it. The universe sometimes offers cruel foreshadowing, and I'd spent an hour watching it scroll across a screen. My body went still the way a lake goes still before a storm. "I'm pregnant," she said, voice trembling with delight. "We will have a child." Michael pulled her close. "If it's a boy," he said, "we'll name him Roger, in honor of Dad." Something inside me rattled like a coin in a jar, like a key in a lock I hadn't touched in years. "Mom, why are you crying?" Michael asked, stepping toward me, baffled and tender and so young it hurt to look at him. "Why aren't you happy?" "Because the tea was cold. Because the lilies stank. Because somewhere in the back of a phone that wasn't mine, my husband had promised a woman I loved that he would be together with her. Because I am Lucy from Detroit and I know the difference between a rumble and an earthquake." I wiped my face with the heel of my hand. "I am happy for babies," I said. "Babies are God's way of proving the world still has an appetite." My mouth smiled. My bones did not. "I just need a moment." Gloria's hand drifted to her stomach, delicate and theatrical, and the gesture hit me like a slap. At the funeral, a note. In the diner, photographs. In my living room, a future with a name I could not say without tasting ash. I excused myself to the kitchen and opened a window even though the air outside was wintry. I let the cold come in and make a cathedral of my lungs. I thought of my mother's sayings: measure twice, cut once, trust, but count the silver. I pressed my palm flat against the countertop the way you might press a pulse. I am not a woman who faints. I am a woman who acts. I turned back to them, composed. "Congratulations," I said, and mended enough to pass for gracious. "I'll put on tea." Gloria beamed. Michael exhaled. The kettle began to whisper on the stove. I set cups and saucers, moved like a hostess, thought like a detective. In my purse, the envelope with dates and names sat quiet and patient. In the dining room, the sympathy cards gleamed like snowdrifts. In my chest, a decision was already forming edges. Anyone can cheat, I used to say. Not mine. Well, life does love a rewrite. As the kettle sang, I looked at Gloria's pretty hands folded over her new secret and saw clear as frost on glass the next steps in brutal, sensible order. Find the truth. Hold it up to the light. Decide whether to burn it or build with it. I poured the hot water and smiled at the steam. The thing about betrayal is it thinks it can make you smaller. But I come from a city that knows how to pound metal into something useful. "Sugar?" I asked. "Sweet as mercy." "Please," Gloria said. I spooned it in, one measured scoop at a time, and counted. That night, sleep and I broke up. We'd been lovers for decades, but grief came in wearing Roger's aftershave and kicked sleep right out of bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, hearing the echo of that funeral note over and over like a record stuck on the same hateful line. "Your husband had a mistress. She is standing next to you. Next to me, in my house, carrying my son's child, maybe carrying Roger's." I turned over, staring at the pale blue glow of the clock. 2:14 a.m. I used to love that hour quiet, when the city's bones sighed and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. But that night, it was the hour of truth. I'd been naive. Not stupid, I never was, but naive. There's a difference. Naive women believe love can fix anything. Stupid ones think it should. I'd been the first kind, the faithful kind, the kind who ironed his shirts even after he started wearing cologne I didn't buy. Roger used to say, "Lucy, you're the only woman who really sees me," and I did. I saw him when he was nervous before big deals, when he laughed too loud at his own jokes, when he forgot anniversaries but remembered the lyrics to every Motown song. But I never saw this betrayal hiding under the tablecloth of our marriage. When dawn finally showed up, I got up too. My body moved automatically. Coffee, toast, robe tied twice around my waist. I stood by the window, watching the first gray veins of light crawl through the clouds. And I decided, if Roger thought death would make me soft, he miscalculated. I'd love that man enough to follow him across states, but I could hate him across the same distance if I had to. The first step was information. Melissa had given me the phone. Against her advice, I'd kept it. That morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the phone plugged into the charger like a confession waiting to be heard. I opened it again. The images were still there, the texts, the names, the dates. Some of the women I recognized from charity dinners or business events. Others were strangers. And then there was the most recent Gloria. Their messages were hot with the kind of intimacy you can't fake. I scrolled until I hit the first one from her. "You looked at me today like I was air." And his reply, "You are, sweetheart. You're what I breathe when everything else chokes me." I pushed the phone away so hard it slid across the table and hit the sugar bowl. My hands were shaking, a voice in my head, the same one that used to tell me to keep my posture straight and my lipstick fresh, said, "Now what, Lucy? What will you do with this?" I wasn't sure, but I knew I'd never let that girl raise my husband's bastard under my roof and name him after the man who made him. By the time Michael came downstairs for breakfast, I'd washed my face, changed my robe for a navy sweater, and arranged my features into something approximating calm. He looked tired too, but happy, the kind of happy that's too simple for complicated truths. "Morning, Mom." He kissed my cheek. "You okay?" "Oh, just peachy," I said. "Didn't sleep much. The lilies in the living room are plotting to kill me with their smell." He laughed, relieved by the normalcy. "Gloria's still sleeping. She had some nausea earlier." "I bet she did," I murmured. He didn't catch it. He never did catch the quiet things I said. He got that from his father. When he left for work, I opened my notebook, the one where I used to write grocery lists and holiday plans, and started jotting down what I knew. I wasn't ready to go to the police or a lawyer yet. No, this wasn't about the law. This was about understanding the scale of the deceit before I planned what to do with it. By mid-morning, I was at the storage unit Melissa had mentioned. I told the manager I was Roger's widow. He gave me a pitying look and a clipboard. The unit was small and smelled of cologne, paper, and cowardice. Inside were boxes labeled with the names of companies I'd never heard of, fake accounts, dummy clients. But tucked inside one of the drawers, I found something more personal, a stack of letters. They were all from different women, some handwritten, some printed. And at the very bottom, a photograph. Gloria, smiling, her hair damp, wearing Roger's shirt. I sat on the cold concrete floor and laughed. It wasn't a sweet laugh. It was the kind that sounds like it could turn into crying if it slipped on one more memory. I didn't cry. Instead, I thought about the irony. I'd left Detroit for Roger. I'd left the city that made me tough, that taught me to fight fair and finish strong. I'd traded it for a life of polished dinner parties and small betrayals disguised as polite smiles. And now here I was, sitting in a rented storage unit surrounded by evidence that my so-called perfect life had been a farce. When I drove home, the afternoon light hit the house just right, turning the white siding gold. It looked beautiful, but it wasn't home anymore. It was a stage, and I was about to perform my best act yet. Gloria was in the kitchen when I came in, humming, her hair tied up. "Hi, Mom," she chirped. "I was just making tea." "Tea," I said. "Lovely. Sit with me for a minute, Gloria. I want to talk." She smiled, polite, unsuspecting. "Of course." I poured the tea, added honey to hers, and none to mine. My hands were steady. "You know, when Roger and I were first married," I began, "I thought love was a clean thing, like white linen. I used to polish our silverware just to see it shine. I thought a good wife keeps everything spotless." "That's so sweet," she said, sipping. "But then I learned," I went on, "even the cleanest linen hides stains if you look close enough." Her smile faltered, just a flicker, but I caught it. "Mom," she said, "is something wrong?" "Oh no," I said lightly. "Everything's just revealing itself, that's all." I watched her hands, young, manicured, with a ring that used to sit on my own finger when I was her age. I wondered what it was like to touch Roger with those same hands. She fidgeted, probably unnerved by my calmness. "Michael said you're still upset about the funeral." "I get it. It's been so hard." "It has," I agreed. "But you know what helps, Gloria? The truth. The truth is like bleach, harsh, but it gets the job done." Her eyes flickered, quick and guilty. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, I think you do," I said, and leaned forward. "Tell me something, darling. When did it start? Before you married my son or after?" The color drained from her face so fast it was almost art. "What?" she whispered. "I'm not senile, Gloria. Not blind either. And I have receipts, literal ones. Hotel receipts, texts, photographs. You and Roger, in his tie." She froze, lips trembling. "Who told you?" "Oh, so you're not denying it." Her eyes filled with tears. It was a mistake, Lucy. I swear. I didn't mean for it to happen. He said he was going to leave you. I was so stupid. Please don't tell Michael. Please. Her begging voice sounded like nails on a chalkboard. I took a slow sip of tea. Don't worry, I said. I wouldn't ruin his life. That's what you and Roger already did. She started sobbing ugly, shaking sobs. I watched her like someone watching rain hit a window, detached, faintly curious. Lucy, I didn't want to hurt you. Sweetheart, I said, you can't hurt someone who's already been set on fire. You can only make her hotter. She covered her face with her hands. I stood. I'm going to find out if that baby is his. If it is, I'll make sure you don't see a dime of inheritance. If it's not, I'll still make sure you never forget this day. Either way, you've chosen the wrong widow to cross. She looked up at me, eyes wide and wet. What are you going to do? Something very unchristian, I said, but very satisfying. I left her sitting at the table, shaking. That evening, I walked down to the small park near the lake. The air was cool, and the sky had that bruised purple color it gets before rain. I watched the water, thinking about all the years I'd spent being the good wife, quiet, agreeable, loyal. No more. From that night on, I was going to become something else, something Roger wouldn't recognize even if he crawled out of his coffin and begged for a second chance. Tomorrow, I'd start the first phase of my plan: proof, DNA, and a lawyer who likes sharp women. I smiled at my reflection in the dark water. Anyone can cheat, I whispered, but no one cheats Lucy Talbot without paying interest. The rain began to fall, light at first, then steady. I didn't move. I stood there, soaked, letting the world rinse the last of my gullibility away. When I finally walked home, I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a storm with lipstick, and I had work to do. Morning arrived with that crisp, metallic smell after rain, the kind that makes everything look washed and new except me. I looked like I'd been through a war, and in a way I had. My eyes were red, my hair stuck out like static, and my coffee tasted like ashes. But I was awake, and that was something. I'd made a list before bed written neatly, in my careful teacher's handwriting. I titled it Operation Truth. Underneath, I had 3 bullet points. 1. Get DNA test. 2. Visit lawyer. 3. Find peace or make it myself. Simple, direct. I'd always believed in lists. Lists never lie. Gloria had locked herself in her room all morning. I could hear muffled crying, the kind that sounds more like guilt than grief. I didn't check on her. I wasn't her mother anymore, not emotionally, at least. I'd been demoted to adversary, and I wore that title like a medal. When Michael came downstairs, he looked concerned. Mom, he said, Gloria said you two had words yesterday. Words? I repeated. That's one way to put it. He frowned. You didn't fight, did you? Oh no, I said sweetly. I don't fight, darling. I just clarify things. He didn't know what to do with that. Poor boy. He had Roger's easy charm but not his cunning. I made him eggs, kissed his cheek, and told him not to worry. Grief makes women emotional, I said with my best fake sigh. We'll be fine. Once he left for work, I grabbed my purse, Roger's phone, and that envelope of dates and names from Melissa, then drove straight to the hospital. The nurse at the DNA testing department looked at me over her glasses, her voice efficient. You want prenatal paternity testing? That's right, I said. Are you the mother? No, I said. I'm the mother of the possible father. She blinked. Ah, I see. I gave her a practiced smile. You will. They explained the procedure, how they could compare Roger's preserved DNA from his medical file with a sample from Gloria's pregnancy. I gave them his records, pretending it was a routine insurance inquiry. Money talks, and my husband had left me plenty more than enough to buy a discreet test. By the time I left, I felt the kind of satisfaction you only get when you start reclaiming your dignity piece by piece. Next stop, my lawyer. His name was Clarence Milton, an old friend of Roger's, but more importantly, a man who owed me. I'd saved his marriage once, years ago, when his wife found lipstick on his collar and I convinced her it was from his sister-in-law. It wasn't, but my story stuck. Clarence stood when I walked into his office. Lucy, he said, I'm so sorry for your loss. Don't be, I said. You'll be sorrier once you hear why I'm here. He looked startled. I closed the door and sat down. I need to make sure my husband's estate doesn't end up in the wrong hands, I told him. What do you mean? I opened my purse, pulled out the envelope, and dropped it on his desk. Photos spilled out like evidence from a crime scene. My husband was having an affair, I said, with my daughter-in-law, and she's pregnant. There's a chance it's his. Clarence swore under his breath. Good Lord, Lucy. I'll take justice, I said, but I'll settle for revenge if it comes gift wrapped in legal paperwork. He rubbed his temples. You want to contest her claim to the estate? I want to make sure that woman never sees a dime of what I built with him. And if the child is his, I'll decide how to handle that when I get proof. Until then, I want his assets frozen and any trust adjustments delayed. Clarence leaned back, studying me. You've changed, Lucy. You used to be naive, I interrupted. Yes, I've been cured. He nodded slowly. All right, I'll draft the paperwork. Good, I said, standing. And Clarence, don't lie to your wife again. You're not clever enough to get away with it. He laughed despite himself. Duly noted. I left his office feeling taller. The world hadn't gotten better, but I had gotten sharper and sharper. Women survive. That afternoon, I stopped by Melissa's office. She looked surprised to see me. Lucy, she said cautiously. I didn't think. Oh, I'm not here to thank you, I said. I'm here to ask questions. She motioned for me to sit. All right. Roger's affairs, I said. Did you ever see money changing hands? Gifts? Transfers? Yes, she said. A few times. He was generous. Watches, jewelry. Once he bought someone a condo downtown. Do you know who? She hesitated. Gloria. I laughed short, sharp, and mean. Of course he did. The man couldn't even keep his lust off the property market. Lucy, Melissa said carefully. What are you going to do? I'm going to do what Roger never could, I said. Finish something properly. When I got home, the house was quiet. Gloria's car was gone. Michael was still at work. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to sit on the couch and really feel the silence. Grief is strange. It comes in waves. 1 minute you're furious. The next, you're hollow. I looked at Roger's photo on the mantle. He was smiling, that same crooked grin that used to melt me. Now it just looked cheap. You should have stayed faithful, Roger, I said softly. I could have forgiven a lot, but you made a fool out of me. And Lucy Talbot doesn't stay a fool. That evening, Gloria came home. Her face was pale, her eyes puffy. She started talking before I could open my mouth. I made an appointment, she said quietly, for counseling. I want to fix things with Michael. I folded my arms. Fix things? Gloria. Some things aren't broken. They're shattered. You can't glue them together with tears. Please, she whispered. Don't tell him. I won't, I said. But you'll tell him yourself one day. Secrets rot, darling. They always do. She wiped her face and went upstairs. I watched her go, and for a fleeting moment, I felt sorry for her, a girl who had everything and still reached for what wasn't hers. But pity is dangerous. It dulls the edge. A few days later, the test results arrived. I opened the envelope slowly, like peeling back a wound. Positive. 99.9% match. Roger was the father. I sat very still. The rain started again outside, tapping against the window like fate knocking politely. Then I laughed low and bitter. Of course, I said aloud. The man never missed a deadline. That night, I didn't cry. I poured myself a glass of red wine, lit a candle, and wrote a letter to my son. Not to give him yet, just to have ready. It said, Michael, I love you more than you'll ever understand. But the truth has a way of demanding its own stage. When you're ready to see it, I'll show you. Until then, trust me when I say that your father wasn't the man you thought he was. Neither was I. I'm stronger. Always have been. Mom. I sealed it, tucked it into the back of my dresser drawer, and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't a widow anymore. She was a reckoning, and I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The morning after the results arrived, the world felt unnervingly normal. The sky was bluer than it had any right to be, and the birds outside were too damn cheerful for a Thursday. I sat at the kitchen table, the DNA report spread open beside my coffee cup, the words probability of paternity, 99.9%, staring up at me like a personal taunt from the grave. Roger's child, growing inside my daughter-in-law, under my roof. If you've never had your reality shattered while buttering toast, I don't recommend it. I didn't cry. Crying is what you do when something breaks. I was past breaking. What I felt was cleaner, colder, the calm before a storm that's been building for months. I'd been patient, too patient, waiting for the universe to make sense. But now, I had facts. And facts are the sharpest tools a woman can wield. By 9 o'clock, I had the lawyer on the phone. Clarence, I said, it's confirmed. The child isn't my son's. There was a long pause, followed by a sigh heavy enough to shake the receiver. Lucy, good Lord. Don't call him, I said flatly. He's the only man in this mess who hasn't disappointed me. Clarence cleared his throat. What do you want to do? What I said before. Freeze everything. Not a cent leaves the estate until I say so. And update my will while you're at it. Your will? Yes, I said. I've decided I'm going to start living again, and I need my paperwork to match my priorities. He hesitated. Lucy, may I give you some advice? Sometimes revenge can turn back on you. Clarence, I said. I'm not turning back. I'm turning forward with style. I hung up before he could start moralizing. Men love to warn women about revenge, as though forgiveness were a badge of honor instead of a choke chain. I took a long shower and stood under the hot water until my skin flushed pink. When I looked in the mirror afterward, I saw someone new. My hair, still damp, framed a face I hadn't recognized in months. Sharp, alive, deliberate. I put on lipstick, a deep red, not the soft rose I'd worn for years. The kind of color that announces, I am no longer taking applications for doormat. Then I called Gloria downstairs. She came hesitantly, eyes swollen, hands clasped like a penitent nun. Lucy? She said quietly. Sit. I told her. She did. I received some information today. I began, sliding the envelope across the table. She stared at it like it might explode. I didn't want to believe it, but now, there's no question. She opened it slowly, read a few lines, then gasped. Oh my God, yes, I said evenly. You should get used to saying his name. You'll be doing it often once I'm through with you. Tears welled up in her eyes. Lucy, please save it, I interrupted. I've heard enough apologies from that branch of the family tree. I didn't plan this, she whispered. No one ever does, I said. That's why it's called a mistake. Planning would require character. Her lip trembled. What are you going to do? I smiled. A slow, dangerous thing. First, you're going to move out. Today. You can take whatever you need, but you'll leave my son and this house behind. Second, you'll tell Michael that you've decided to take some time apart to think about the baby. Third, you will not under any circumstances tell him who the father is. When he finds out, it'll be from me, and on my terms. She shook her head violently. You can't. He'll hate me. Oh, darling, I said. That's the least of your worries. She began sobbing again, but I didn't flinch. You're lucky I haven't called the press, I said. Detroit loves a scandal, and this one would keep tongues wagging till next Easter. You wouldn't, she choked out. Wouldn't I? I leaned closer. You really think you know me, Gloria? You think I'm that sweet, forgiving mother-in-law who made you pie and listened to your whining about throw pillows? No, that woman died with Roger. The one sitting here now, she's what happens when the wrong people get burned. She stared at me, speechless, tears streaking down her perfect face. Go pack, I said quietly. And Gloria, leave the wedding ring on the counter. You won't be needing it where you're going. She ran upstairs. I heard drawers slam, zippers, muffled sobs. I sat there, sipping my coffee, calm as a judge. When she finally came down with her suitcase, she paused at the door. I'm sorry, she whispered. I really am. I believe you, I said. But that and $5 will buy you a latte. When the door closed behind her, I felt lighter, not happy, not yet, but unburdened, like I'd taken the first true breath in years. Michael came home that evening to find the house quiet and half empty. Where's Gloria? He asked, glancing around. She needed space, I said, stirring soup on the stove. You know how pregnancy hormones can be. He nodded, bewildered. Did something happen? Yes, I said softly. Something happened a long time ago. You'll understand soon. He frowned, confused. Mom, are you okay? I turned, gave him a small smile. I'm better than okay, honey. I'm free. That night, I poured myself a glass of bourbon, Roger's drink of choice, and sat by the fireplace. I looked at his picture on the mantel and raised the glass. To your legacy, I said. May it burn as bright as your ego. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my old recipe notebook. It had been gathering dust since before Roger's death. I used to bake all the time, pies, cakes, little pastries that made the neighbors hover at my door like hungry bees. Roger had once called it my silly hobby. He said I'd never make a dime from it. That night, I flipped to the page labeled lemon chess pie and smiled. You were wrong about a lot of things, Roger, I said aloud. Let's start proving it. Over the next few weeks, I baked like a woman possessed. The house smelled of sugar, butter, and second chances. Michael thought it was my way of coping, and maybe it was, but it was also the first step in something bigger. I started selling small batches at the local farmers market. People loved them. One customer asked if I'd ever considered opening a bakery. By the third weekend, I was selling out before noon. I called it Lucy's Revival. Every pie was its own little rebellion, every crust a quiet act of vengeance. And in the middle of it all, I started smiling again, not the practice smile I used at parties, but something real. Then, one afternoon, Clarence called. "Lucy," he said, "I have news. Gloria's filed for child support through the estate. She's hired her own lawyer." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my mixing bowl. "Of course she has. That girl's nothing if not predictable. What do you want to do?" he asked. "Fight," I said simply, "with everything I've got." And I meant it, because by then, I'd learned something important. Revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about reclaiming power. And honey, power never tasted sweeter. The next month rolled in like a tide of paperwork and powdered sugar. By day, I was up to my elbows in pie crusts, and by night, I was knee-deep in legal documents. My kitchen had become both a bakery and a war room, smelling of cinnamon and retribution. The bakery, Lucy's Revival, was taking off faster than I expected. There's something magnetic about a woman who's been through hell and learned how to bake her way back. People didn't just come for my pies. They came for my story. They didn't know the half of it, of course, just the polished version I fed them between samples. "Oh, my husband passed," I'd say, handing over a slice of bourbon pecan tart. But he left me with recipes, not regrets. It was true in a way, just not in the way they thought. Meanwhile, Clarence and I were dancing through court filings like partners in a grim waltz. Gloria's lawyer, some preening little man named Tannen, tried to paint me as a bitter old widow clutching her pearls over her husband's mistakes. He underestimated how dangerous I am when I've got good lipstick and better evidence. At the first hearing, Tannen strutted in like a peacock, smirking as if the case were already won. Gloria sat beside him, pale and demure, her belly now round beneath her black dress. She avoided my eyes, which was wise. When the judge called my name, I stood, chin high. Clarence handled the formalities, but every time that smarmy lawyer tried to twist the story, I gave him a look that could curdle cream. Tannen argued that Roger's estate owed support to the unborn child, Roger's legacy. He called it legacy. I repeated when it was my turn. Interesting word. A legacy implies something worth remembering. The judge's mouth twitched, trying not to smile. Then I slid the DNA results across the bench, neat as a lesson plan. "Here's the issue, Your Honor. The mother of this child is also the wife of my son. I don't believe the law intended for marital betrayal to be rewarded." Tannen sputtered something about compassion, about family. I cut him off. "Compassion is for the innocent. Gloria doesn't qualify." The courtroom was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner and the scratching of the clerk's pen. The judge finally said, "Mrs. Talbot, you seem remarkably composed." I smiled. "Your Honor, I was married to that man for 20 years. You learn composure the way you learn fire drills, by surviving what comes next." The ruling didn't happen that day, but I walked out of that courthouse with the distinct sense that I'd just handed karma a megaphone. Outside, Gloria caught up to me. "Lucy, please," she said, voice trembling. "You don't have to do this. I've lost everything already." "Not yet," I said calmly, "but give me time." Her eyes filled with tears. "I loved him," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Oh, sweetheart," I said, touching her cheek lightly. "Nobody means for rot to set in. They just ignore the smell." Then I turned and walked away. That night, I baked until the oven door opened and closed like a heartbeat. Lemon chess pies, apple crumble, chocolate silk, an army of sweetness rising out of bitterness. I'd been feeding grief for months, and now grief was finally feeding me. Somewhere around my fifth pie, Michael came downstairs. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes. "Mom," he said, "I got a message from Gloria's lawyer today. About court. What's going on?" Ah, there it was. The moment I'd been bracing for. "Sit down," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. "It's time you knew." He sat. His face was so open, so heartbreakingly innocent. Roger's jawline, my eyes. "What is it?" I took a breath. "Michael, the baby Gloria's carrying. It's not yours." For a second, he just stared. Then he laughed, a short, stunned sound. "Mom, that's ridiculous." "I wish it were," I said. But I had a DNA test done. It's Roger's child. His face drained of color. No, she wouldn't, she did. He stood up, pacing. You tested my wife's baby without telling me? Yes, I said simply. Because I love you enough to want you free of lies. He pressed his hands to his face. My God, my own father? Yes, I said softly, and she knew. He turned on me then, eyes blazing. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wanted proof. Because I didn't want you to hear it as rumor or rage. And because sometimes, I said, the truth needs to walk in fully dressed before it knocks on the door. He sat again, shaking. What am I supposed to do now? Whatever you choose, I said. But understand this. Forgiveness doesn't mean you owe her your future. It just means you refuse to let her own your anger. He didn't answer. He just sat there, broken in that silent, masculine way that men are taught to break. When he finally went upstairs, I poured myself another glass of bourbon and went out to the porch. The night was cool, the moon fat and smug. I leaned back in the chair and thought about Roger. He'd left behind more than a mess, he'd left a pattern. Lies handed down like heirlooms. And damn if I wasn't going to break that cycle right here, right now. The next morning, Michael was gone. A note sat on the counter. Mom, I need some time. Don't worry about me. I'll figure this out. Love you. I folded it neatly and tucked it into my apron pocket. I wasn't worried. My boy had strength in him, maybe not my kind, but enough to survive. 2 weeks later, the judge ruled in my favor. Gloria's claim was denied. The estate would remain under my control. She got nothing but a court order for supervised visitation once the baby was born. When I walked out of that courthouse, people turned to look at me. Maybe it was my red dress. Maybe it was the air of victory. But for the first time since Roger's death, I felt alive. Melissa met me outside, smiling faintly. You did it, she said. Yes, I said, but it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like closing a door. She nodded. Sometimes that's all the victory you get. I invited her to the bakery the next week. She came, tried my chocolate bourbon tart, and said it was the best thing she'd ever eaten. You should be on television, she told me. Funny thing, a few months later I was. A local cooking show called Baking Bravely featured my story. Widow turns grief into glory, the headline read. I laughed when I saw it. If only they knew the full recipe. Gloria disappeared after the birth. She sent Michael a picture of the baby, a boy, with Roger's eyes. She named him Roger, like she'd promised, as if spelling it wrong could scrub the sin off. Michael didn't go to see her. He told me he didn't need to. Some ghosts are better left unvisited, he said. I hugged him tight. That's my boy. That night, I baked one last lemon chess pie, Roger's favorite, and left it on the porch for the raccoons. Let the scavengers have it. It was fitting. Then I looked up at the stars and whispered, well, Roger, you sure gave me a hell of a plot twist. But I gave it a better ending, and somewhere deep inside, I swear I heard laughter, mine, not his. Because revenge may not heal, but it sure does teach you how to live again. It's funny how peace sneaks up on you. Not like a bright sunrise, but like a quiet evening when you suddenly notice the world has stopped shouting. By the time a year had passed since Roger's funeral, my life looked nothing like the wreckage it had been. Lucy's Revival wasn't just a bakery anymore, it had become a little empire. The storefront glowed warm light into the Detroit dusk, and the smell of butter and caramel had replaced the perfume of grief that used to cling to my clothes. I hired a few women like me, the over 50 crowd everyone else forgets about. Divorcees, widows, women whose husbands needed space and forgot to come back. We wore aprons and lipstick, played Motown on the radio, and laughed like women who'd learned to survive the punchlines life threw at them. They called me Miss Lucy, like I was some sort of general in a sugar-coated army. Maybe I was. We made cakes that melted hearts and cookies that mended them. I'd found something better than revenge. I'd found purpose. Still, there were days when ghosts knocked. Michael came by often. He looked older now, that kind of hard-earned maturity that comes from having your world collapse and still showing up for work the next day. He was rebuilding piece by piece. He'd started dating again, a woman named Sierra, soft-spoken, kind, with a spark in her eyes. I liked her instantly. Gloria had vanished to another state with her son, Roger's son. She didn't call. She didn't write. Occasionally, she sent photos through Michael's lawyer. I never asked to see them, but one day, curiosity or closure got the better of me. The boy was maybe 3 by then. Blonde curls, gray eyes, that unmistakable smirk that Roger had worn like a signature. I stared at the photo for a long time, then tucked it in the back of my cookbook. Behind my recipe for chocolate bourbon tart, the past belongs in the margins, not on the mantle. And that's when I got the call. A producer from a network in Chicago had seen my local TV segment. They wanted me to compete on a new cooking show, America's Sweetest Redemption. Well, I said, laughing, you picked the right woman for that title. It was surreal. Walking onto a studio set, cameras everywhere, the scent of sugar and competition thick in the air. 20 contestants, most half my age, some half my height. They all smiled nervously, thinking the gray-haired lady was harmless. By day 3, they learned otherwise. I baked like I'd been waiting my whole life to prove something, maybe to Roger, maybe to myself. My pies won over the judges, my humor won over the audience, and my story captured the nation. When they asked why I started baking after tragedy, I told them the truth. Sometimes life gives you lemons, sometimes it gives you arsenic. Either way, you make a pie and serve it with a smile. The audience roared. I made it to the finale, me and a 28-year-old influencer with a ring light and 1,000 sponsors. During the final bake, I caught her glancing at me nervously. You're really calm, she said. Honey, I replied, rolling out pastry. Once you've survived betrayal, camera lights feel like spa therapy. When they announced me as the winner, I didn't cry. I just laughed big, loud, and free. The kind of laugh that makes the universe sit up and take notes. After the finale aired, the bakery exploded. Orders came from all over the country. I even got letters from women who said my story gave them courage to leave, to heal, to start over. One wrote, "You made me believe life doesn't end with betrayal. It doesn't. It just changes flavor." And then came the strangest twist of all. One evening, closing up shop, I looked out the window and saw a familiar car parked across the street. A woman stepped out, tall, elegant, a little older but still recognizable. Gloria. She crossed the street slowly, holding the hand of a small boy. When she stepped inside, the bell above the door chimed, and every sound in the room seemed to hush. Lucy, she said softly. Gloria. I nodded toward the little boy. So this must be the famous Roger. He clung to her leg, shy. I crouched to his level. Well, aren't you handsome? You've got your grandfather's eyes. Try not to borrow anything else from him. Gloria smiled faintly. He wanted to meet you, she said. Oh, I raised an eyebrow. Or did you want to see if I'd forgiven you? Her eyes shimmered. Both, I guess. We stood there for a moment, the air thick with unspoken years. Then she said, I'm sorry, Lucy, for everything, for him, for what I did to Michael. I was young and stupid and thought love was supposed to hurt. I studied her face, older now, softer. Love's not supposed to hurt, Gloria. It's supposed to hold. But I'll say this much, you've aged into your guilt gracefully. She let out a breath, half laugh, half sob. I deserve that. Probably, I said. Then, to the boy, would you like a cookie, sweetheart? He nodded. I handed him one from the counter, oatmeal raisin, warm. He bit in, grinning. And in that moment, I felt something uncoil in me. Not forgiveness exactly, more like release. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. When they left, Gloria turned at the door. You're doing amazing things, Lucy. You really are. Darling, I said. Amazing is just what happens when revenge gets tired and reinvents itself. After they drove away, I locked up, turned off the lights, and sat for a minute in the quiet glow of my little bakery. I thought of Roger, of the girl I used to be, of the woman I'd become. Then I said it out loud, to the empty room. Sometimes it's hard to understand betrayal, but why understand something when it's already clear? The past is a book, you can read it, but you can't rewrite it. I took revenge until I realized revenge doesn't make life easier. It just teaches you how much strength you already had. I smiled, remembering Michael and his new girlfriend. They'd just announced their engagement. Gloria had written to say she was happy for him. The world, messy as it was, had a strange way of balancing its scales, and as for me, I finally slept through the night. No ghosts, no notes, no tears. Just dreams of sugar, laughter, and the faint hum of Detroit outside my window. Because life, my dear, goes on, and mine finally was sweet again.